So this is the first video of my new channel, and I want to talk about something that I've never shared on this channel before, and it's probably the new direction that I'm taking. A more authentic me, I guess. By the way, this is my local beach. Let me just show you in the background, the sun rising there. So I've got my coffee and I just thought I'd jump on here and kick things off. It's beautiful. I'm not going to tell you where it is though, because everybody else will be here. It's nice and quiet. I learned that from an old man who was walking on the beach one day, and I asked him how beautiful the sunrises are here. And he went, yeah, my daughter keeps telling me to post pictures on social media. And he says, I'm not going to do that, because if I post pictures on social media, then everybody else will know how beautiful it is and they'll all come down here. So I thought that was a really good frame for him not wanting to spoil his piece. And quite honestly, there's nobody on these beaches where I live. And I'll say New South Wales, just north of Coffs Harbour. I'll leave it at that. I want to make sure that I just go through some of the key things. They'll kind of be a bit mixed up, but these are the key things that you're going to get from this video. So first of all, retiring early. What does even retirement mean? It means many different things to many different people. But when I talk about retiring early, it's not about taking a pension, it's retiring from the corporate job. So that's the big thing, because it's not about taking the pension. The reality is the golden age of pensions are pretty much done. So especially if you're in my generation or even younger, they just don't exist anymore. You're very lucky if you've still got one, but that means that you've been working for a company for a long time and you've had one of those final pensions. And even those have been reduced quite a bit now. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, what do you want your day to be like? It's really important, because when you give up the corporate role, all of a sudden your day-to-day structure changes quite a bit. So to what extent, what hours do you want in your day to be focused on maybe doing some type of business or work versus leisure time? And that'll be an important factor to think about. I always think about this in terms of what would be my ideal day. And because I live near the beach, I love getting up early, going for a walk on the beach, going for a dip in the ocean, having a coffee, having my eggs. There's a very kind of, by the way, before that, there's going to the gym. Having that kind of structure is important as well. And it helps give you a little bit of purpose. Think about that. And then there's planning the corporate escape or exit. You definitely need a plan, so it needs to be well thought out. But maybe there's some kind of system, and I've got playbooks and systems that have worked for me. Business replicates some of those things, so that'd be key as well. And then the other bit is lifestyle. So what do you actually want from that life? Is there a certain threshold of income that you need? How much do you want to travel each year? Do you have family in different countries like I have? I've got family in the UK. I live in Australia, so there's that regular travel required there. And what dependencies do you have? Do you have children that depend on income that you might need to sustain them with? You know, it might be in university, it might even be still at school. My daughters are grown up now, so there's less dependency. Although I will say it's a bit of a fallacy thinking that when they leave school or university, they won't have dependencies on you. They can cost you just as much, trust me. So that doesn't change. Next one would be, what would those new sources of incomes be? Remember I said there won't be these golden pensions. So what are going to be those new sources of income that you need? And I think about that in terms of building assets. You don't want to be leaving your corporate job and then giving up all your time to work more hours. And then building this portfolio career. And for me, this portfolio career it can mean that you've got multiple regular income sources. So you may have built a business and that business now is paying you a salary or bonuses. That will be something else we were talking about. There'll be other income streams as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about those things, like being paid to speak. There is a consulting you might want to do. There might even be short-term retainers that you might want to do, or even part-time retainers. Or like I do, I work with different technology vendors, being able to leverage some of my expertise to help them with promoting their technology and services through things like social media, articles. If you can get all this into a system that's fairly repeatable, And the last thing I'll just say is, and this is probably for another video, but how do you become a notable authority, if you like, in your industry so that you attract that attention? Might sound superficial, but ultimately that's what all marketing and sales is in any business. You have to do that for yourself so that you, in your portfolio career, can attract business rather than you going to get it. And that's really important. That will again be a separate video, and I'll talk more about that. Daniel Priestley, if you've not ever read one of his books, you should do. He talks about that in terms of being a key person of influence, which is a great book if you've not read it. Okay, well, I'll leave it there, and I'll literally just start walking through some of these areas. So let's get into it. So I was working in the corporate world from the age of probably, I would say, about 28, 29, so my late 20s. And I've been in that corporate world ever since. And, you know, I'm not going to say that the corporate world's bad or anything like that. This is definitely not what this video is about, or what I'm going to be talking about in future videos, because I've done very well out of the corporate world. I've got to the very top of my profession, and that's in cybersecurity. And so I'm very proud of those achievements. But there was always this kind of nagging splinter in my brain, really, that I never was quite the right fit. We've heard of this thing like imposter syndrome. That's definitely been a key thing for me, I would say. But I think I was getting towards further in my career, and I was getting into my late 40s. I was beginning to question a lot more about, do I want to be doing this as I get much older? And I think I was commuting into London. I was traveling on the train, and if anybody knows what that commute's like in London, especially on those late kind of January days, you know, you just had Christmas, you've had an amazing time with all family and friends, and then suddenly your realization is that you're back in the kind of the cold, the wet, the grey skies, trains not running at all, leaves on the line. There's so many things that kind of hamper that commute, and you can't get a seat typically on the train in. And I used to look around me and see people, and they just looked generally either disconnected. But the people that struck me most were the people of my age and older. And at that time I was, you know, probably early 40s. And I'd see these people who were getting into their 50s and even 60s and maybe even older. And you could see they were almost had lost their soul. And I felt at that time that I did not want to be doing that. I obviously didn't know what their circumstances were. And you should never pretend to know what other people's life is like. But I just put myself in their shoes and was thinking, what if I had to do that? And I think this idea of having to do that just really frightened the hell out of me. And I just thought, it's not the life that I want for me and ultimately my family, or certainly my wife and I. So a lot of my choices after that were not necessarily framed by the money or the career goals. It was more about lifestyle that was dictating what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I think that subconsciously must have hit me, because we say that subconscious drives pretty much all our decisions. And I think that was true for me. You know, it planted a seed back to maybe wanting more freedom. So that's what it was for me. And so it's funny how the world or the universe conspires to bring about the things that maybe you want. And I always remember getting this call really early morning when I was in my London job, working as a chief security officer for a global fintech, which was a fantastic job, and I enjoyed my time there. It was from a headhunter in Australia. Got the call, and it was talking about this job in Australia. Now, Australia was never on the cards for me. I'd never really thought about it. And it wasn't until I'd done the interviews, spent some time in Australia for a very short time, then took the job, realized a very different lifestyle to what I'd been having in the UK. I got switched on to this much more kind of life versus work rather than the other way around. And yeah, that set me on a path to thinking about, even when I was working in Australia, because I was living on Bondi Beach at the time, and you'd have this kind of beach life and then you'd have your corporate life. So you go into the office and quite honestly, I didn't want to go into the office. I was just drawn to being in this kind of beach life. But of course, that's not reality. You've got money to earn and everything else. But I was always torn between that. Now, I was trying to think of ways that would allow me to have that more flexible freedom. If I rewind back to 2015, I had started the idea of thinking about having a freedom by helping co-found a business, which was, that is called Outthink. I'm still a small investor in that company, but Flavius has gone on, one of the other co-founders, to run that as a successful CEO. And I think that business is going to exit. Maybe not hundreds of millions, I don't know, it's hard to say, but needless to say, it's a successful business that's grown exponentially. And I'm very proud of what's happened there and the fact that I was part of that initial incubation or ideation of that. So that planted a seed. And then in 2018, I met two co-founders in Sydney, Australia, and we built a company called the Cyber Leadership Institute, which is thriving. It's now, this was 2018, but now, fast forward to today, that's now operating we've got customers from 80 countries around the world, big strategic partnerships with the largest cybersecurity membership organization in the world. And we've got customers from some of the most iconic brands like Standard Chartered Bank, my old previous company I worked for, National Australia Bank, Westpac, McKinsey, Accenture, IBM, many other household brand names that we've known. So having got that gave me this kind of anchor to something that was more flexible. We bootstrapped it. We've never been making huge amounts of money from that, but that's been growing in the background. And this set me on this idea of, could I build something on the side without necessarily jumping out of the career? Most businesses take a long time to mature. We weren't really making any significant money until very recently. And that was back in 2018 to where we are now. So you need to build the brand, the customer base, the trust, the annual recurring revenue from subscriptions and memberships. That all takes time. But what we can all do is start this process earlier. And I've been talking about, this corporate exit planning by design. And if I was to look back at myself, 5-10 years earlier, I could have done some of these things much sooner. And this is becoming even more important now in a world where AI is beginning to really dominate and cause massive layoffs in every industry, including my industry, the cybersecurity. We need to be thinking differently about the different sources of income that we can generate for ourselves so that we can be more self-sufficient. One of the big decisions that we made when coming to Australia was finding a house that was big enough that we could rent rooms out. So in that particular house now, we've got one room downstairs because you get more for your money basically in Australia than you get in London. Well, it depends where you are in Australia. Sydney's still one of the most expensive places to live, which is why we didn't choose to live there. But, we've got one room rented out and then there's an Airbnb, so there's income coming in from that. I was fortunate enough to have an apartment in London, which we've been able to rent out as well. So these are all things that you accumulate over having a successful career. So, this is why I think having a good career is important, to kind of keep that money coming in and build up savings and everything else. Then I guess the time came, I was quite clear that this idea of quitting my high-paying salary was something that I was going to do. Most people just go one more year, and never really do it. Either your health fails or lots of different things can happen as you get older. Relationships can break down because of stresses and strains at work. But the health was one of the things that I was probably more concerned about. And then having the time back in my life, which allows me to focus on health, which is one of the things that I believe is massively important. I think it's the foundation of pretty much everything. Without your health, nothing else matters. You get ill, and it's the only thing you can think about. So that was really important to me. But this idea of when anybody's thinking about quitting, especially a high-paying job, that last career that I had, that last big job, I was earning in excess of $1 million a year, huge compensation package of shares, the bonuses, everything that you'd expect from those kind of high paying in the banking world. I felt I'd saved enough. And so that was it. I made the decision that I would quit my job. And quite honestly, it has been the best decision. Time will tell whether that was absolutely the right decision. But for me, it feels like the right decision for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. But the key for me it's not just about jumping out the job. And even when you come about quitting, can you do this in a way where you negotiate your way out? And that's what I did a lot of as well. This was a negotiation. It wasn't an immediate quit. It's something that I'd set in motion many years ago. And even in the company that I was in, I talked about this idea of doing something different, very thought through, and almost a playbook approach to doing that. So this is definitely something I think everybody should be thinking about, especially if you want better health, you want to regain your freedom and have a life that you're living on your terms. Way fast forward to where I am now, I have managed to build up multiple income streams, and the business is now thriving. We're still not getting huge salaries from that, but that's done on purpose. We want to keep reinvesting in the business. That's the side of Leadership Institute. Who knows, in the future, we might sell that business, might go through some mergers and acquisitions, or we might just continue and it will continue to grow. But we love doing that business. And that's another part of this as well. Pick something that you're good at. I always think this idea of looking back 5 years, looking back 10 years, and thinking about how could you help that person, that version of you, is a really good idea without thinking about starting a business. Your personal experience and expertise, because I think that's really important. How can you help the next generation? And I guess the phase I've got into now is because I've built these multiple income streams, built these 2 7-figure businesses, how can I help others do the same? And that's what this channel is going to be all about. I'm also running a regular masterclass now. That masterclass has evolved. It was all about helping people combining leadership and business building. But that's evolved over the years that I've been running that. It's been highly successful in terms of the numbers that we've been able to attract, some amazing endorsements. It's a one-day masterclass that I do, and I'm not charging a huge amount for that. I think for me, the more people I can reach from that is what I'm looking for, and I enjoy doing it. But that's moved much more into how do you build a portfolio career? That's ultimately the goal, really, is building a portfolio career with these different multiple income streams that allows you to stay aligned to your purpose, allows you to focus on your health, and having more freedom. This is important as well. Don't build businesses that's going to be just like another job. Cyber Leadership Institute is literally a few hours a week. It's not taking up all our time as co-founders. We have an amazing operations team. Scaling a business becomes important. Don't get me wrong, in the early days, it's a lot of work. Doing the full-time job, building the profile, building your personal brand, your authority in the industry, all takes a lot of time. So there is a lot of work to do in the beginning. If you do that work early on, you'll come to be able to reap those benefits later. So yeah, multiple income streams, public speaking is one. Obviously, I've mentioned Cyber Leadership Institute. I work with some technology vendors as well, help them do some local dinners, lunches, roundtables, do some podcasts as well, helping startup founders raise their profile. Although increasingly, I'm pointing them towards the playbooks and systems that I built rather than me just spending my time helping them. But many of those coaching conversations I have are just, I do them free of charge because I just enjoy helping some of those individuals. So I very much choose those individuals that I work with. And I've already got some great examples where they've gone on to build either their own training businesses, their own platforms, and even their own products as well. There's this idea about multiple income streams associated with assets, and Daniel Priestley has this concept of 24 assets. I don't think you necessarily need 24 specific assets, but you definitely need assets of value. And I'll talk more about that in other podcasts about how you can build assets of value. But look, I just wanted to kick off by saying, subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more about building a portfolio career, having multiple income streams, certainly getting in the best shape of your life. And, in my mid-50s now, I'm probably the fittest I've ever been. So, especially for all you men out there, when testosterone levels start to drop, what can you really do to optimize? And I'll talk in specific videos about some of those health regimes that you can stick to and easy to apply. Ultimately, it's all going to be about how do you do things that you want to do that aligns you to your purpose in life. And we're going to be hearing more about this in a book that I'm spending quite a bit of time writing right now, which is all about going back to my kind of entrepreneurial spirit that was born through my parents and the different businesses that they did. I spent time working in my dad's ice cream van whilst he went off and worked on a gas station on the East Coast. My dad did window cleaning on a weekend and I helped him with that. And then they went into the pub industry and I worked for them. That's probably the first step into a career. But seeing that kind of an entrepreneurial spirit that they had was something that's kind of been reborn for me. So this is more of an awakening, I guess, more than anything else. This is where I'll be spending time helping you transition from a corporate life, exiting your corporate life, into a life where you've got more freedom, regain your health, and hopefully have a lot more fun. Please subscribe, comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've got anything specific that you want to learn more about, well, then please put that in the comments and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers, Darren, out. Before we go, quick look at that beautiful sunrise. Cheers, bye.